Hey, what's up, everybody? What is up? I am so freaking nervous. It is not even funny. Oh my gosh. Hold on, give me just a second. Just a second. There's one thing that I forgot to fix. And that is just the white balance on my camera. I don't need any white balance. All right. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by, for hanging out. I can't tell you how long I plan for this to be. I have no idea, but I'm just really excited that you're here. It's Native American Heritage Month. It is a month that, being completely transparent, for a part of my life wasn't super important, and I'm excited to get into why that is and why it's important to me now. But yeah, I'm excited to talk more about what it was like growing up Indigenous, what it was like growing up in Native American culture. What are just some favorite foods? What is some of the music? What was it like just growing up, going to school? Like, there's just so much stuff that I'm excited to jump into. I had to even take notes on my phone to make sure that I can kind of stay on track a little bit. And then I've got my sister's going to be popping in here in just a little bit, and she's going to share some of her thoughts. But yeah, this is just the first go at it. I don't know. I wouldn't mind doing something like this again later in the month with just other Native creators. So if you know any, please ping them and let them know that this is a thing that I want to do. But yeah, normally I feel like I'm much more well spoken, but I'm usually not this nervous. But yeah, I'm just happy to see Ro, it's happening, dude. I hope you got my message on Twitter. I'm so sorry I had it for next Monday, and thank you, Threat. Thank you. I'm going to need you to keep telling me that every once in a while. But yeah, so I just want to go ahead and jump into a handful of things if y'all don't mind, and then if you have questions, I don't think I put it into like the description or anything like this, but it is an AMA. If you've got questions, if there's stuff that you want to know, like what this was like, what that's like, don't feel afraid. Don't feel afraid to ask any type of question, because I think asking questions first and foremost is important, because it's the only way that you're going to know. But then also, to me, it shows that you care. So asking questions shows that invested interest that you have, and just gives me a chance to talk a little bit more about that. And then also, just a disclaimer. I know Threat is out there. Threat's watching. Threat is also a mod. So let's keep it holy. Let's keep it nice. Be kind to each other. Let's try and keep hate out. I don't know if any hate's gonna pop in, but just throwing that out there. But okay, so let me consult my talking points of things that I wanna bring up, especially before Skyy gets in here. So I guess if you're watching this and you got brought here by a friend or just someone else or another creator, my name is Asa Green River, but to some people that's all I am. I'm Asa. You don't know my last name, but if you hadn't seen my original post for what this month is, my full first name is Asa Nanica. And that was a name that was very specially and thoughtfully chosen for me by a medicine man. And I was actually the medicine man who helped with my name. That is also his name as well. So that was a very intentional thing that my parents did. And that was just something that I think was really just prevalent throughout my whole life. They were very intentional with making sure that I was raised within native roots as best as they could. Sometimes a little bit too much. And I do have the chat over here, so I don't ever want it to seem like I'm not paying attention or I'm not looking or anything like that. I just want to make sure that I don't miss anything. So, yeah, so please feel free, if you've got those questions, throw them in as I'm talking. I'd love to divert. Please, I would love to divert and talk about what you want to talk about. But yeah, so I was named after a medicine man, and a lot of people, I feel like, make fun of, I don't want to say make fun of, but they really use lightly the spirit animal. Like, I don't know if anyone else has ever seen that, like, somebody will talk about something. I can't even come up with a good example at the moment, but they're like, oh, that's my spirit animal. Oh, that is me. But in Native American culture, like, a spirit animal is a sacred thing. And growing up, my brothers and sisters and I, like, we were all given our spirit animals. It was a very intentional process, again. And I'm going to try and remember everybody's. I can't remember everybody's. But my mom, let me backpedal just a little bit. My mom is actually, my mom's white. So I am biracial. But from the get-go, probably because she was also adopted, she was very much like, hey, I want my kids to be raised with Native American culture in mind, because that's their dad. So, but there's that. So anyways, so my mom's given Native American name, when they had their marriage ceremony, and they had two. They had the traditional white man ceremony, which was like, get married in a church. And then their Native American ceremony, and I am very much going to butcher this. I probably should have reached out to them, but it's called the blanket ceremony. I remember it that much. But anyways, so my mom's given Native American name is Zikalanuni. I'm pretty sure. So her given spirit animal, and Ro, you're fine. I saw that. You said you're guilty of doing that. It's like I said at the beginning, it's important to, like, I'm not doing this to like roast people or make people feel bad. But this is just like an education piece. So like, now you know. But even if you do it, I'm not gonna call you out and say, dude, how dare you? But so yeah, so my mom's given Native American name is Zitkalanoni. Sorry. mispronounced it there. And then her given spirit animal is the dove. My dad, and he's never gonna watch this, but he is going to kill me because I cannot remember his actual Native American name. Oh my gosh. If anybody's watching this later and you happen to know my dad, which I highly doubt that's the case, please don't tell him. But his given spirit animal is the wolf. And his name, I don't remember what my mom's name means, but I remember what my dad's name means at least, so it's Boiling Wolf. So, and then I don't remember my older brothers or my older sister, what theirs are. I apologize, guys. It happens. But, so mine, again, Asenanica, it's my name. It actually means the star child, not to like put myself on any sort of pedestal. Hey, Mike, what's up? But my parents obviously had big dreams for me growing up. So my name means the star child. My other sister underneath me, her name is the longest one out of all of us. It's 17 characters. Her name is Pumiwatakitum, but we call her Tani. And her spirit animal is the deer. So I know I'm talking circles. I'm getting severe dry mouth because I'm just very nervous. This is very out of my element, and personal. But all right, we're coming up on time. I know Queen Latina needs to get her butt in here, but let me get Skyy in here. Because I was trying to lead it up perfectly to the minute of, all right, I talked about Tawny, I talked about myself, and now let's talk about Skyy. So let me get her in here, and I want her to talk about her own name, and her talk about what it means. But she is in the Zoom waiting room, so she'll be in here in just a minute. And hopefully the song at the beginning, if people end up being able to watch the VOD later, I hope that Twitch does not give me a copyright strike. Because that is one of my favorite powwow songs. I've got a playlist. You should definitely check it out. And that song's called The Young and the Free, or Young and Free. Skyy should be popping in here. I just got her the invite that she said that she did not get before. And we're going to get here and to talk about her name. Give me just a second. She's having some troubles. Hey, I resent it to you! ! If you saw my tweet yesterday, I made a video because I said I was too lazy and 280 characters was not enough for me. I do voice to text all the time, like a classic dad. Yeah, there we go. Let's get her in here. All right, Skyy, are you here? Mm-hmm. Can you turn your phone? You are sideways. And can you turn it, like, in portrait mode? Or landscape, whatever it's called? There we go. It didn't reorient or whatever that's called. All right, so just to catch you up to speed, because I don't know if you were watching the stream. So I had talked about Mom's name. Her given Native American name, not her actual Jan. Talked about Dad's name's meaning, because I couldn't remember Dad's name. Mm-hmm. Talked about mine. Talked about Tawny's, and I was leading it up perfectly into you talking about yours. So I know the chat is like, it's super small, but I still have it on there in case you guys pulled up. Times Arc, what's up, man? Thank you for keeping it up there. Before I give it to you, Skyy, to talk about your name and the meaning behind it, and then if you want to talk about your name, the meaning, and your spirit animal. I want to read this real quick. Threat Level says, at some point, can I talk about what it's like working for a company who very much supports cultural appropriation in their culture? Absolutely. I am not afraid to do that. You better believe it. So let me pull this up here. If it starts to overlap my face, it's fine. Okay. All right, Skyy. Hopefully you all can hear her. Hopefully you all can see her. But I'm going to pass it off to you, Skyy, if you want to talk about yourself.
Yeah. So Skyy is obviously the name that I go by, but my given name is New Skyy. It's probably out of all of our siblings the most difficult one to spell, just because there's a lot of punctuation
Hmm.
in it and everything, apostrophes and hyphens.
Do you mind?
But
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Do you mind spelling it out?
yeah, so it's N apostrophe W hyphen SJKI hyphen NACOWA. So it is 16 characters, I believe. Yeah, Nuskanikoa, it means our long road to heaven, which seemed to be a bit of a joke to our parents when we were growing up. Don't know why. Guess I was difficult to deal with, and my namesake followed that narrative.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then my spirit animal is a white buffalo or a water buffalo, um, a bison, um, and that's just kind of how I guess I felt like represented in our culture,
Hmm.
because buffalo are very, very important to us. They were, a sign of prosperity. They were a source of nourishment, and they were hugely connected spiritually to our people. And there was a lot of, I think, representation of our culture through like buffaloes. Like I know people will kind of link the buffalo population going down to um, resources for ongoing indigenous communities kind of being threatened. That's something that I even learned about in a conservation class that I took in college, was how indigenous communities were being hurt because so many buffaloes were disappearing.
Yeah.
So I feel very important in that way. That's kind of a link to my spirit.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I think, and I'm glad that you brought up that, and thank you, Ro. Rose just, I don't know if you got the chat up, but Rose just showing some love, sharing these stories. But talking about mine, so I completely, so my spirit animal is the bear, and based off of what our parents told me and just how I have come to, I think another big thing is, if you look way, way, way back in the day, when this was our land and we were here, we were the only ones. The whole thing behind the spirit animal, of course, it was given to you based off of like what type of energy you were putting off as a child, but then it was also prophetic. Would you say, like, you would agree with
yeah,
that? And I think that aspect is where I feel kind of in line with what our parents were saying. So like
yeah,
with a bear, bears are super protective, and they can be incredibly vicious. Not that I'm a vicious person, but very tenacious and bombastic.
yeah,
Um, but really, the protective piece. But bears are also very loving.
yeah.
Like for some reason, I just think of the Revenant, where that mama bear was protecting her baby, and she destroyed Leo DiCaprio.
Yep.
That was me. But that's just how I grew into appreciating my spirit animal, and now,
Mhm.
of course, like bears are my favorite animal, more particularly the polar bear. But yeah, so that's as far as we've gotten so far. I know I shared that note with you. And
Mhm.
please, again, if you're watching, first of all, thank you. We appreciate you taking the time to stop by and to listen to us talk about all of this. But if you have questions or anything like that, please put it in the chat, because we would love to talk about it. Sky, I know I told you like 15, 20, 30 minutes was what I had thought, because I didn't want to take away your whole night, but whatever you
Mhm.
want as well. So
Yeah.
like if we hit the 30-minute mark and you're like, let's keep going, then let's keep going.
Yeah.
So, okay, awesome, dope. Thank you, Threat Level. We got a question in the chat right now before we hop in the next thing. So, what was it like hearing about Indigenous history in school? So, I think we have very differing perspectives because you and I are 10 years apart.
Yeah.
So, I would say, Threat, if you don't mind, Sky, let's take it elementary and then go to like middle school, go to high school, and go to the collegiate level, and we'll just kind of
Mhm.
both talk about each thing as we go through. So I'll start off elementary. Wow. Elementary school, growing up, learning about Indigenous history was very, very weird because it wasn't really talked about until it was this time of year, until it was Thanksgiving. So we're learning about the Mayflower. We're learning about Thanksgiving, what actually happened. Well, not what actually happened, what happened in white history. And that was really it. You know, there was probably a little bit of bookended talking about, because where we went to school, there are burial mounds around us. I feel super disgraceful, and maybe you remember, but I don't remember the tribes that were specifically around here. I want to say Maumee, but I don't think that's necessarily correct, because I thought Maumee was closer down to Miami University, but that's neither here nor there. But anyways, yeah, so it was very much isolated to Thanksgiving, which is super weird. And the way that it was talked about was very prehistoric. So as we talked about these events, as we talked about the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, thank you, Step Brothers. We talked about the Mayflower. We talked about Christopher Columbus, the Pilgrims. It was all about a time long, long ago. And that was really it. It wasn't like, yeah, and this is also a culture that has unfortunately been diluted throughout history, but is still around and thriving today. And I think what saving grace there was, and I don't think it was super common when I was in school, but our parents, more particularly Dad, would go to different elementary schools within Licking County in the area where we went to school and speak for a day about Native American culture. And I remember in 4th grade, in Mrs. Armshare's class, was the first time that Dad came to my class, and it was the most embarrassing thing of my entire life, because he forced me to come up to the front. I was a very shy kid. I'm still shy, you just wouldn't guess it. But he forced me to come up to the front, stand there, talk about what my name is, what my name means. Like, I had to try and learn this stuff and think of it on the fly as a kid, and I didn't really know it. But so I vaguely remember him talking about a few things. The highlight was always the fry bread. And that's something I can't wait to talk about later, to talk about food. But doing Indian tacos. I know how we feel about the word Indian, but but Skyy, what was elementary school like for you?
I think about the same thing, that we only talked about Indigenous cultures around Thanksgiving, which is super ironic that they would highlight Indigenous people at, like the anniversary of their mass genocide.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that goes to show how little truth there really is being taught to children about our culture. And I think what's even more impactful than what we learned is the fact that there was so much that we didn't learn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we barely talked about it. I remember around Thanksgiving, we would have like a coloring sheet of people with feathers on their head. And sometimes they would have us dress with feathers on our head in the classroom as some interactive learning, even though we weren't learning anything. I remember in the 4th grade, I had a project called Ohio Heroes, where all of us in the class had to choose a hero in history that was from Ohio, and we had to dress up as them, and we had to do a presentation as them in front of the class. And I remember my teacher told me that I should be Tecumseh. And I didn't think of anything like about it in the 4th grade, but I'm like, why me?
Yeah.
Like, why do I have to be Tecumseh? And so I had to dress as Tecumseh in front of my class and talk about that. And I just remember thinking, like, how weird that was, that like everyone else got to choose, but they told me that that's what I should do.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't like that teacher anyway, but that still just kind of stood out to me. But yeah, Mom and Dad coming into class was nice for me, because I was like a social butterfly, especially in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember, especially with the native tacos, like getting to go around my class, and like my classmates got to meet my parents and hear like all about me and like my life. And I got to give them food. Like that was a good experience for me. And I like how it's changed a bit, that now when our dad does that, the teacher asks him to come in not just around Thanksgiving, but has him come in different parts of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's spread out more. So I
Yeah.
noticed that now they're being a little more intentional with that. And they come in multiple times a year. But when I was a kid, it was much different.
Yeah. And I think it's not to like take away from the positive effect, but it was that specific teacher. It wasn't like the district as a whole was
Nope.
was going with this initiative. So going on to middle school years, for me, not a ton to share, because this was definitely at the time where I don't want to say I was at my most burnt out with being Native American, but of course, hormones, puberty, all that stuff, angst, teenage angst. I was on the cusp of all of that in middle school, and I had talked about it before, but especially our dad, mom obviously didn't help with this, but dad was always very forceful with all of our involvement within the culture, and it didn't ever feel like it was for our own benefit.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like we want you to experience this because we want you to find your own purpose and love with it. It was, no, you're gonna do this because this is you. So that by the time that I was in middle school, I was over it.
Yeah.
So even though all of the things that I mentioned before were still happening, like I had noticed it, it was one of those things where I was just kind of shut off to it.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think for me, around middle school, around that age is when it became more of like a conversation that like you said, dad would have with me about it. And to me, it was less forceful because this is you and you're going to know this, but it was more like it would be stress to me that I needed to know all of this stuff and I needed to identify with all of this stuff about being Indigenous because it's running out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's like a weird thing to have to perceive. Even
Yeah.
at middle school, it's still a young age. But that's kind of how it was stressed to me, and it was confusing. And so I didn't really, I guess, dive into any of it.
Yeah.
Because it just kind of made me feel like, oh, well, if it's running out, then why is it still important?
Yeah.
That's how it made me feel.
And so getting into high school, that's kind of where I was at. I was still kind of like, hey, don't shove it down my throat, okay, with mom and dad. But I was very much feeling that stress of dad always saying, hey, this stuff is disappearing. The stuff that you're getting in school is not 100% accurate. And everything else, if you just look around the world, like our stuff is disappearing. And this around high school is really when I started to notice, even though I never really spoke up about it. And they're great things. Like Black History Month is fantastic. Hispanic History Month, like all of those other ones they need to happen. They should happen. But like I remember, more specifically, I remember Black History Month. It was a very celebratory thing. You know, the entire month we look at, black leaders within our country, people of mention throughout history. We really celebrated the culture, and I was starting to get rubbed the wrong way by the school system, because then when it came to November, it was still the same thing. Even when I'm in high school, it's still the same thing. Hey, it wasn't celebratory. It wasn't, hey, let's look at these key people, like these key Native American. Like, of course, you knew about Pocahontas, you learned about Sacagawea. And honestly, at that point, it was more meme-like than it was actual education. You talk about Tecumseh. The only reason we talked about Tecumseh is because there was that production around here.
Yep.
And aside from like those few people, there were no other key Indigenous folk or Native Americans that were talked about in school. And it was still just the. I mean, like maybe we went on a trip to Roscoe Village, where we went on a trip to the canals, and we looked at a little diorama of the mounds in the area and the people that lived here at that time, and then that was it. And it was really like a one and done, get out of the way type deal. And even though it felt like I was teetering, even though I was a little upset by the school system, it wasn't enough for me to like want to say something, because I was still at that point where the parental pressure was on me. But how was Indigenous history in school for you in high school?
In high school, I don't remember learning about Indigenous culture at all. And I mean, like you said, there would be talks here and there about like, oh yeah, there's Pocahontas, but that story was never told the right way.
No.
Ever. I mean, people just think about the movie, which I have mixed feelings about, because when I was a little kid, the movie Pocahontas was like, that's me. Mm-hmm. Like, finally I see somebody that's me. But now that I'm older, it's so conflicting, because I'm like, this story is so wrong, and they romanticize this horrible piece of history.
Yeah.
But I mean, we talked about that. I don't ever remember in high school talking about even Sacagawea, even though everybody knew, like, and like you said, Sacagawea was a name that was like a joke to.
She was on that golden dollar
that I went to school with.
That's the only reason why we had talked about her when I was in school, is because she showed up on that golden dollar, and I remember people distinctly calling them like Sacagawea coins or stuff like that. It was never like, hey, who is this woman?
Yeah, I remember that. And there was a point, I think it was my junior year, that at our high school they did something called Bulldog Rumble, because we were the Bulldogs, and it was this big pep rally before the homecoming football game, and everybody in the school would order Bulldog Rumble t-shirts that a student would design based off of what team we were playing for the homecoming game. And my junior year, we were playing the Utica Redskins, and our Bulldog Rumble shirt that is student designed, and the design got passed off for all the students to wear, was a bulldog stepping on an Indigenous person's headdress and shooting them with a bow and arrow in the back.
I remember that.
And I remember going to the principal's office, and I couldn't even talk about it because I was so upset. I wrote like a handwritten letter, and I brought it to the principal and said, this is a problem. This is so offensive. And they didn't do anything about it. They didn't even like put out a message on like the intercom about it. It was just completely like brushed under the rug. And honestly, that's probably the only real like memory I have about anything having to do with Indigenous culture in high school, was that incident.
Yeah.
Because we didn't talk about it. And the same thing, there were so many lessons about like Black history and amazing Black figures, which I loved learning about and I think are super important, but we never got any kind of representation about people. Like even today, like I'm ashamed to say it, but I hardly know any Indigenous, people that are really ahead in our culture.
Yeah.
Just because it was never taught to me. It's always been pushed down and made unimportant, and the school systems never picked up on it.
Yeah. And I want to pivot to that, because that's something that has been, and I'm going to like try to not get I feel super emotional about that right now, because it makes me very angry. But I want to reference what Ro is talking about right now, like who looks at that and says approved. Ro, if you look at, this is where we talk about systemic racism. And sorry. And when people talk about systemic racism, especially right now, you you only think about it when it comes to one subset of people. Because we have the Black Lives Matter movement. But what I think people don't understand, especially those who downplay the Black Lives Matter movement, is how important that movement is to us as Indigenous people. Because, like, if you look at the NFL and the Washington Redskins, look how long that went on before they finally changed it. Now the new name is stupid. It is the dumbest thing ever. But if a professional football team isn't going to change their name for who knows how many years, why would a local high school change their name? And really, I think that's why, like, no one's going to bat an eyelash to that. Even to this day, I'm pretty sure that high school is still the Redskins.
Yeah, they are.
They are. So, like, nobody's going to say anything. No one's going to stop them, because that is how. And this is where I want to pivot the conversation. I still want to, if we can, I still want to talk about what Indigenous history in school is like on a collegiate level. But I feel like this is where the conversation needs to go, is culture appropriation, proper representation. And I don't want to make this a soapbox or a platform for me to scream at the gaming industry at large. But when I put that tweet out, it was not for clout. It wasn't for attention. It was because I'm tired. I'm tired of everything being whitewashed, and I want that representation. I want it. If it's not going to be me, fine. Then I want another Indigenous native face, at least on one freaking episode of somebody's podcast. But that's just one instance that I was I know I was talking about the gaming industry in that video and that post, but it is so much bigger than that. And that's what I want to talk about. So I'll give you some time if you want to think of some things that really stick out to you, unless you have them right now. And I want to talk about television. Like, I just want to jump into that, because that's just initially where my head went. Watching TV growing up, like seeing any sort of Native American figure was like, it was either non-existent or it was a very, very like stereotypical caricature of what our culture is.
Yeah. And
that honestly was just the case with everything. But nobody said anything. Like, nobody still, I don't want to say nobody at all, but still not too many people say anything about it, because that's just how, like, there's nobody cares. Because that was the history of our people to begin with, is people came to this country. It was not their country. They killed, they murdered, stole, raped, pillaged, burned, everything. Took everything from these people, and then have the audacity as time goes on to, and it all starts way back when. And this is where, like, I'm not trying to make this a hate fest on our parents, because while they were too much, I'm appreciative now because I have some knowledge. Did they go about the right way? No, but anyways. But our dad, for example, when we were growing up, I was not allowed to watch old Western films because of the whole Cowboys Indians thing, which is weird, because our dad, because he grew up in that era, that's like all he watched. And I remember distinctly, good gosh, hold on, I have to remember it. I think it's called Kansas Pacific. Do you remember that?
No.
Dad watched this movie called Kansas Pacific. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's it. And he watched it all the time. But whenever you would see Native people in these old 1930s, 40s, 50s, whatever, these movies, it's like the equivalent of blackface now.
Yep.
Like, it wouldn't just be a face, it would be a whole thing, and they'd all be white people. It'd be a white man that's like kind of tan, and they would do the stereotypical. And and this is gonna I want to bring up this point real quick. I know I feel like I'm just going on, and I want to get it to you. Also, Queen Latifah, thank you for that validation. It is Kansas Pacific. I remember distinctly. I was in second, third, or fourth grade, and we had a TP growing up. It was over in a park not too far from our apartment. I had friends with me. Dad was in there. Like we would sleep out there and spend a lot of time there. And I remember walking in, going, "How?" Which now you know is very offensive, but that's how they portrayed Native Americans on TV. So as a young child, knowing that I'm Native American, seeing a Native American on TV going, "How?" When I did that, whew, Dad ripped me a new one. You know, I don't know if everyone's like this, because not everyone has a long name and then a shorter version of their name, but whenever I heard Ace and Annika, I knew I was in trouble. And my dad ripped me a new one in front of my friends because I did that. He's like, "Do you know how racist that is? That's what the white man wants you to know, wants you to believe that that's you." And I'm thinking, "Dad, it was on your show. I only saw it because you were watching it." But yeah, so that's just my my very clear memory of what it was like seeing that kind of stuff on TV. But I went on for a long time. I apologize. What do you have, Skyy?
I do agree that every time I see, which is very rarely, but every time I see a character that is Indigenous in movies, in TV, they're either an alcoholic, they are in a loincloth, and they talk very deep and slow because they're so wise and mysterious. And that's it. That is literally it. And something that really has upset me in the last like year or so, or whenever it happened, is a movie that I loved growing up because I felt represented, was Spirit, the movie about the horse. It's so sad that I felt this immense representation from a horse. That was my representation. And it was about, I mean, it was more than a horse, but it was about these Lakota people who are, you know, fighting for their freedom or something. I don't even remember all of it.
Yeah.
But Netflix released a new TV series called Spirit something, the wild, who cares? And they completely erased all Indigenous influence. It is all white little kids and a horse.
Are you
Literally.
serious?
It's a cartoon, and it is all white people and a horse. When the whole like point behind the horse was the Indigenous culture. And now it's all a bunch of white kids.
Yeah.
And that was so upsetting to see, that it's like, I can't even keep a horse to myself.
You can't. We can't.
I can't. The erasure is so just, people allow it.
Yeah.
And they have no issue with it. And if they do, they make a statement to say like, "Oh, that's so wrong," and then they forget and they stop caring. So yeah,
I want to pop over to a comment in the question in the chat from Ro. Can you share any examples of good representation for Native Americans in any media? I'm in a boat where I've seen a Disney movie and the poor job they do teaching us in school. Can you think of any?
No, I can't. I think of the very small amount of any representation I've seen. I think of, I think it's Night at the Smithsonian, where there's the little native figurines that come to life, and they're, you know, the traditional loincloth people.
Wait, do you mean Night at the Museum, or do you mean
Night at the Museum? I think.
Yeah.
I think of that movie, and that's bad representation. I can't. I mean, there might be out there that I haven't seen,
Mm-hmm.
but everything that I think of is negative.
Yeah. Um, Sounds like we have a long way to go with what I
Yep.
just asked. Yes. So for me, Ro, it's funny you asked that question because in trying to prepare for this, even though I said that it wasn't prepared, I was trying to have something. I was trying to think of something that is done right, and I can't. In talking about like movies growing up, I know we already talked about Pocahontas. One movie that I still watch now, even though I don't know why I still watch it, it's called Indian in the Cupboard.
Yeah.
The title alone, no. um, but that one is about, the kid's got a magic cupboard. He puts the toys in, comes out, and they come alive. And the whole thing is the first toy that he has is he's got these little Native American figures, and I can't remember the actor might actually be Native, because I think they try to do a good job and like showing his culture. But if you really watch the movie from the perspective of how does this actually showcase Native culture, it's not that great. It's really not. And talking about a game's perspective, because this is where I feel like I have a little bit more knowledge. Again, it's not great, but like if you look at any Native representation within games, it's typically a Western.
Yeah.
You are either playing as a cowboy and you're fighting Native people or alongside Native people for whatever reason, but it's not to help them. You are a Native person, but you have been Westernized. You're still a cowboy. You just have a feather right here and a dream catcher on your shoulder. You've got... Okay, so Queen Latifah said the actor was Native American. Okay, I thought so. And I could tell that brother was trying with what he had. But anyway, so back to games. Like you've got Assassin's Creed, and even in that one, I remember when Assassin's Creed 3 was first teased, I was ecstatic. I didn't have the best relationship with my dad, and I ran to my dad. I was like, "Dad, look, we made it, brother. We made it. We're in Assassin's Creed." And then you play Assassin's Creed, and it's like, your name's Connor. Like you have this whole long name, but you go with the white name Connor. And that's like the very tip of the iceberg as to the issues with that. But Red Dead 2, even that, I don't want to say that's the best because that's like, okay, I guess I'll take it. There's not a lot. There just isn't. Then you've got like...
I will say...
Oh, go ahead.
I also thought of, and this is a show that I love, but Parks and Recreation.
I was thinking that.
Even has some hard parts to watch because, I mean, I understand why they incorporated those, caveats to Native culture is to say how in like a small white town, it's completely overlooked and even romanticized. And there are horrible, bloody murals in their city building of massacres and everything. And they talk about how the Wamapoke people, built their town. And there's like Ken Hotate, the leader of the Wamapoke tribe, he's in the show a lot. And I know there's one episode where Leslie is trying to stop construction on this site that she wants. So she takes some fake Native artifacts and buries them in the ground. So they can say that it's like sacred land that they can't do construction on. And even though she owns up to what she did and she says that it's terrible and she tries to fix it before anyone finds out, she apologizes to the leader of the tribe and he still covers for her. Like, it just... I know that they're just doing it for the sake of the plot of the show.
It's satire.
But it's like, she owned up to it. Why couldn't you let her accept the consequences?
Yeah.
Why did we have to come in and save them as if they've done anything for us?
And here's the really messed up part about that, Skyy, is that honestly, Ro, I would say that that's probably the best representation in movies, TV, whatever, of Native Americans. And even then, like you're pointing out, it's a satire, it's a joke, it's still taken lightly. And I understand that it's a comedy, but at a certain point, with other cultures, with other even like sexual orientations, ethnicities, whatever, why are we, not that we shouldn't, why are we being so careful and walking on eggshells with them? But with Native people, that's okay. They're dead anyways. You know what I mean? Like it's so easy. I think that is a perfect example of why it's so easy just to write it off. But yeah, I think that's, and to your point, Ro, I think Red Dead 2 is probably in a very similar situation to Parks and Recreation, where it's not great and there are a lot of issues, but it's like, I guess that's the best we're gonna get with that. But this is the reason why we got to fight it. I feel like Black Lives Matter is just the start. We have to, there's so much systemic racism, and I'm not trying, this isn't going to be a racism talk. This is about Native American culture, but you can't talk about one without the other. There's no settling. We have to keep pushing. NFL, it just now happened. Let's keep going. I want to jump to the next question. From Threat, I don't understand why cultural appropriation when it comes to indigenous culture is still so... Oh, wait, no. It's just a comment. Yes, it is still very normal in today's society. Still very normal. I created a meme not too long ago. It was just like this basic white dude. Skyy, your face disappeared, by the way. Basic white dude, blonde hair, blue eyes. And I just put like, I'm Native American and I'm okay with it. Do you remember when I made that? It's not a good meme. I was practicing, but that's that. I made that because everybody and their brother, at least around here, says I'm part Native American. And if you are, okay, I don't want to deny that. Let's talk about why you are. Settlers came in, destroyed people, ripped women and children away from their families, like forced them into their families with, I know I already said the word early, but I'm trying to not, I want to try and be a little bit family friendly. But anyways, that's why you're part Native American. It wasn't by love. It was by force.
Yeah.
And obviously probably us as well. That's just the way that it all falls out. But it's, to get back to what your statement, Threat, it's like, it's still so normal because it's so diluted. And Skyy, you said it so much better. I can't even remember the word you said now. But just talking about how the culture is just, it's very thin. It's out there. There's no substance to it anymore because aside from like being with us and our families, I feel like they're the only people who care. The media doesn't care. The people at large don't care. The education systems don't care. The government doesn't care. I mean, for goodness sakes, they force us onto reservations. We can talk about that later. But yeah, Threat says, didn't they just change the Cleveland baseball name? Did they? I don't know. That'll be news to me. Let me actually look that up really quick. Because they were the Cleveland Indians. As much as I don't. Mm-hmm. And the mascot is, no, they're still the Cleveland Indians. What they changed was their logo. Because you remember their logo was a very offensive bid. There are talks about it because it's the same thing with the Redskins. There are talks about it because they're trying to get that changed. But they did change the logo because it was a big red face with a feather on top. Because we're a joke. We're a Halloween costume. We're a logo. That's it.
Yep.
And I want to, with that statement, unless you have anything else you want to say about entertainment and stuff that you've noticed, because I've got another question for you, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, in talking about, like, we're a joke, what do you think is the next step? I don't want it to be like a wrapping up thing, but I'm just curious, to your mind, if we're going to change the name of the Cleveland Indians, if we're going to make Native American culture important to people? Because it seemingly isn't. Like, what do you think we need to do? What do you want for you?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think a huge step is I just want people to know that we're still here. That if they don't know about the true history and all of the oppression and the massacres and the slavery and everything, if they don't know the depth of all of that, I at least want them to know that we are still a people, that we still exist, that we're not extinct, that we're not just history,
Yeah.
that we are, we're present and we're future, and we are just as much leaders, we're just as much artists, we're just as much, mothers and fathers, and like we're people, we're still here. So
Mm-hmm.
many people, even when I see like on TikTok, there are a couple, I would say, up and coming, like native indigenous creators on
Mm-hmm.
TikTok that
Yeah.
are getting some traction, educating people or just showing off, like their dances and their regalia and everything.
Yeah.
So many comments that I see are like, oh, wow, that's so cool. Like, just acknowledging, like, oh, yeah, that's cool. Didn't know, like, that was a thing. Didn't know that this was, a culture or a
Mm-hmm.
part of the culture. It's just, it seems like a lot of people are like just kind of looking at it in passing
Yeah.
and not thinking about, the impact behind it.
Yeah. And and Jay Grady and Ritz are 100% correct. It's got to be the education. It's got to start there. It has
Yeah.
to. It's you bring up a great point. People are commenting on these TikToks, and I mentioned this. I believe it was yesterday, but I was on the Trophy Room podcast. Great guys, by the way. And at the beginning, we were just shooting the breeze, and I was talking to them about what it was like growing up in Native culture and the food and the music and stuff. And they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that you guys had that. I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know." And it's exactly what you're saying. Is people? How sad is it that people don't even know?
Yeah.
That's how whitewashed, that's how diluted, that's how much cultural appropriation, all of the above. People don't
Yeah.
even know that this stuff exists. But we were the first people here.
Yeah.
I want to go back to Threat brought up a question, and I know that you've experienced this as well. I want to talk about culture appropriation in the workplace. Something that at least I experience right now, and I feel like people experience everywhere, especially in 2020 for whatever reason. I don't know why this is the year for people to do it, but the word tribe. The word tribe is being used in their eyes in a way to we need to be a group of people like a family, even if we're not blood, coming together for a common goal for each other. Um, and even though the intention is good, a tribe, that's us.
Yeah.
A tribe is our people. It's like what I was talking about before, and I think this was before I pulled you in, Skyy, talking about the spirit animal. What's your spirit like? What's your spirit animal? Like that whole
Yeah.
thing that people use all the time. The tribe is the same thing. That is a sacred thing to Native American culture, but it is, but because our culture is just so depleted,
Mm-hmm.
everybody is using it, and it's not even just
Yeah.
where I'm working. I know that you experience too. So like, what are you running into?
I agree with that, um, about tribes, and especially in like, I don't even know how to say it. It's just like a blanket statement without like going into it. But even just like, graphic designs and clothing and stuff that have like the Aztec or native designs, and they always say like find your tribe or stuff like that. Like it is so people are so desensitized to it. Like, what's wrong with using the word community? That's a
Yeah.
great word. I love that word. Why don't we use that instead? It gets the message across. Why do you have to use this term that clearly is used in certain cultures?
Yeah.
Um, and in terms of, cultural appropriation and like the workplace and everything, I worked at a child care center for a while, and I remember when Thanksgiving came around, all of the crafts for the children was, feathers and dream catchers, and making, even for the infant room, it was making teepees by stamping their feet in
Hmm.
paint. And they were making teepees, and they were drawing people stick figures with feathers. And that, it's like, when we talk about how we need better education to learn about Indigenous cultures, it's not just we need to learn the right stuff, it's we need to stop teaching the wrong stuff. It
Hmm.
starts as soon as babies and toddlers and preschoolers. This incorrect, harmful, erasing information starts so young. It's like we have so many steps to take. We don't just need to be making steps forward, but we have some serious steps back out of where we've walked ourselves into that we need to work on.
And I don't want to have a defeatist mentality, but I find myself feeling the same pain that I felt back in June. Who's going to fight for us?
Yeah.
It's been going on forever. Ritz, I saw you in the chat. I appreciate you so much. You reached out to me on Twitter, and I appreciate that. Who's going to fight for us? Because it's so bad. It's so bad that when you go to, and there are so many. I know, because I've been like really into fonts lately. Threat can attest to that. I've been so into fonts lately that as I've been going through all of these, tribe. Quinley T, you said it says powwow, it says dreamcatcher, it says all this stuff. Taking these designs that mean something. They mean something to our people, but they're so. I feel like I'm using the same words all the time, and I want something else, something more powerful. But it is so diluted. It's like you took this rich culture, and you got a strainer, and you put everything into the strainer, and you're just getting like droplets out, and then that's what everybody sees. All of this richness, this love is put on a reservation for it to stay. I
know how I feel
Yeah.
with that is that we are literally an entire existence of people, of creation, that has been boiled down to nothing but an aesthetic to people.
Breach girl, that's we are nothing but an aesthetic right now. I wanna get to the chat here. Jay Grady, some of us white people grew up being taught a very tainted view. It is absolutely no excuse, but we need to unlearn those things and learn the truth. That is 100% correct. And I think that is the same stance of you can't say that I'm not racist. That's not enough anymore. It's not enough. You need to be anti-racist. You can't just say, oh, well, that's what I taught, I know it's not right. No, you need to unlearn that. You need to pick new words. You need to pick new aesthetics. You need to pick new costumes, new designs.
Yeah. And I, again, to reiterate what you said, I don't want to have this defeatist mindset, but it's like, how do we go about unlearning this stuff and making people be intentional with what they do, if not just our country, because it's not just First Nations people here in the Americas, but Indigenous cultures and groups of people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
The very beginnings of these countries just start with the erasure of these cultures. Yeah. Literally, these countries were planted in massacre and genocide.
Yeah.
And getting rid of whole entire groups of people. How are we supposed to change individuals' minds when it's literally the foundation of the land that we live on?
Right. So I want to. There's a few things here in the chat that I want to make sure to point out before I get to something specifically that I see here from Queen Latia and Threat. So that says, like basing an entire company meeting around a company tribe. Yeah, it was rough. But then you feel like one voice. If you have an entire organization, and this isn't not even just about this one thing. There's so many things that when you have one small voice and it feels like you have just this is the systemic racism part, and you have an entire corporation that's saying something to the contrary. That's how do you feel like you can say anything? Because you are small and they are mighty. Queen Latia, it's as tacky as a tattoo of a dream catcher. You see so many people getting dream catcher tattoos. Do you know what those mean? Do you know the history behind those? You don't. Threat level, it's so frustrating to me because I know that you've tried to speak out and people think you're just being too sensitive and don't take it seriously. 100%. In all facets, in all areas. No matter if I'm talking to friends, if I'm talking to fellow church members, if I'm talking to people on Twitter, talking to people, it doesn't matter where I am. You try to say anything, but again, you said it so perfectly, Skyy. I can't even hold a candle to it. But we're an aesthetic. That's what we are now. But we need people to unlearn, and we need to move the other direction. I want to talk about powwows. No, go ahead.
I want to say, to speak to that, I know I've already told you personally about this, but even just an experience that I had today.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was at the hospital going to get an x-ray, and the nurse that was registering me, sees my legal name that I'm signed in as, and she couldn't say it, so she just said my last name, which I understand. That's fine. That's fine. You don't want to butcher it.
That's our life.
And so she asks me, "Are you an Indian?" And I said, "No, actually, I'm Native American." And she continued to call me an Indian. And I said again, "Well, it's Native American Heritage Month, so I love to talk about my heritage, especially at this time, like with other people." And she just said, "Yeah, I'm so fascinated by Indian culture, American Indian culture." And it's just like to my face, like in this like 30-second encounter that we have with each other, I've corrected you twice and you still say this to my face. And it's like, I cannot be the first time that you've heard that that's the wrong thing to say.
Yeah.
And if I am, then that is so sad.
And another thing that I just thought of when you were saying that is, if people if they're using dream catchers, if they're using tribe, if they're whatever it is, if their heart is in a good place, say something to us, talk to us about it. I would feel better if it was like, okay, I can't think of any other culture's thing right now. Let's talk about this because I want to shift over to powwow. If someone says, "Hey, let's have a quick powwow," super offensive. Don't ever say that. But if you came to me and said, "Hey, would it be okay if I said powwow?" Like consult with us. If you want to make your whole theme about a tribe, I don't want all white people making that decision. We need to be a part of that decision process as a filter, so it stops. No, not okay. Is it okay? Well, let's do it the right way, and then it might be. But let's talk about powwows, because I want to shift to something positive a little bit, even though there might be some negative memories to them. But I want to talk about what powwows are to us, our experiences with them. And please, if you've been to a powwow or if you've never been, please put that stuff in here. Put that stuff in the chat. If you've been there, share your experiences, because we want to celebrate together. But if you have questions about what a powwow is like, or anything about powwows in general, please put that stuff in there. But at top level, and we'll go into specifics with music and dancing and food and all of that. But just top level powwows. Skyy, but what are powwows for you? What are your experiences?
I love powwows. Ever since I was little, I remember going to them, and that's probably one of the places on earth in my life that I have felt the most comfortable. Is just being surrounded, and I literally just feel so surrounded by love and culture, and I feel like I can be myself, and I'm not scared to be there, and I don't have to worry about, I mean, there's going to be something everywhere, but I most of the time don't have to worry about, someone saying the wrong thing or someone being super racist to me. I can just be myself and be with other people that understand what it's like to be me, that understand my culture and how I feel about the world. And it's just such a safe space. And it's really made to be a gathering of people from different nations, different tribes come together and just really just live together. We celebrate being alive, we celebrate our blessings, we celebrate the earth that we live on, and we celebrate being in each other's company. It's just really all about happiness. And I don't ever want other people to think that just because you're not Indigenous, you can't go to a powwow. That's not for you. I do think that there is a level of sacred things that happen or are talked about in our culture that are just for us. But at least from my perspective, and other Indigenous people are allowed to feel differently, that is okay. Mm-hmm. But from my perspective, powwows are so much about bringing all different people that are really just one people on earth together, that people of different cultures can come and enrich themselves in what we live every single day. I remember in high school bringing my friends to a powwow to celebrate like our homecoming weekend. We were all, getting together and partying, and there was a powwow going on. And I said, why don't we do that? And you guys can join in. And they danced with me, and they went around to all the different vendors and saw the different clothing and asked questions about the jewelry and the painting and the colors and everything that's just so important. And even if you're not Indigenous, you can still go and feel comfortable because it's literally all about love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, powwows were they were coming together, and they were for so many reasons. Whether it was a celebration of harvest, marriage, children, if it was diplomacy, like there were so many reasons for them. But all we knew them was just a celebration of life and giving thanks for kin, for brother, for sister, for Mother Earth, for everything that we have. And I feel bad. I feel bad that growing up, I remember there was a shift, like I'd said before, with everything else, where there's a shift where I loved it and then I enjoyed it to where, I'll be honest, I had a disdain for it. Because it was forced upon me. I was a very, very shy, in his shell, in his box kid, as a kid, and so being forced to dance, being forced to sit in that drum circle, to be trained as a drummer, all of that stuff was like, I'm sitting with people I don't know. I was just very, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to say it besides I was very uncomfortable, but now looking back, I can kind of filter out those negative memories, and I miss the smell of sage.
Yeah.
I miss the smell of burning sage. I miss I miss the music. I miss the energy. I miss the love. I miss the dancing. I miss the food. I miss turquoise. Um, almost always a time where we were camping out too, whether we were sleeping in the teepee or even after those racist vandalizers destroyed our teepee. You know, we brought a tent instead. You know, and we stayed out in a tent, and gosh, I miss it so much, and it sucks that COVID's happening because I want to go to one so bad, and
Yeah.
my wife can definitely attest to this, that I would say what really sparked my love again for my people was finding out that I'm going to be a father. When I found out that I was going to be a father, that she was pregnant, and it was like just this click of like, this is important. Yeah, I don't know where else to go, but there's stuff in the chat, and I asked you guys to say, and I want to make sure to get back to it. Queen Latie, I miss the smell. I can feel the drums beating in my memories. 100%. 100%. Ritz, hot summer days, babies running around everywhere, so much laughing. Yes. No shirt, no shoes, no problem. It was some of those times where I felt the most connected to the planet. I don't know if that makes sense. To the earth, not like to America, but just to the earth. And I felt welcomed. You know, you'd mentioned you felt safe. No racism. Yeah. Everybody that is there is the same as me. And there was no hate at all. Even being mixed. Like, being, you know, we're half Native American. They didn't care. You know, we're still a Comanche brother and sister. Jay Grady, dude, I love this. I'd love to get to talk with you. Sorry, I'd love to get with you and talk and learn. Absolutely, and I appreciate you being here. I really do. Sorry, my mind's running a million miles per minute, and I'm still nervous even now. Threat level ASO made you pursue your own relationship with your heritage more recently. Yes, exactly. Like I said, my wife being pregnant. And I'm sorry, we'll get back to powwows, but I want to make sure to get to that and not just skip over it. But I think one of the big things, so obviously when I found out that she was pregnant, I felt that immediate importance right away. It was something that was already kind of creeping up, but it wasn't as powerful until that moment. But for our baby moon, we went out to Colorado. And if you've never had a baby moon or know what a baby moon is, if you have a baby coming or on the way or whatever, take a baby moon. It's like a honeymoon, but it's before the baby comes. It's fantastic. Go in the second trimester so you don't get too sick. But anyway, so we're out in Colorado, and I don't think we said this at all during this entire thing, Skyy, but we are Comanche. You know, there are so many tribes. We're more specifically Quahati Comanche. But yeah, there are so many tribes, and there's so many subsets of those tribes, so many bands, and not to diverge too much, but it's just sad to know that there is such diversity, but we're all just like lumped together as like Native American and that's it. But it's like, no, we're all so different. We are so different. Like everybody around here in this area in Ohio talks about being Cherokee. Okay, well, Cherokee and Comanche, very, very different. Like, yes. If you have questions about that, we can get into that. We're not historians, like we had said before. The knowledge that we were given to us was very sparse, but what we do know, we love to share. But anyways, being in Colorado, being in the place of our people, my wife can tell you, I immediately was hit. I felt that feeling that we had talked about being at a powwow. I felt like I belonged. I felt like I could look around and see other people that looked like me. I immediately, just being in the airport in Colorado Springs and seeing a mural of Native faces, felt seen, felt hit. I cried a lot on that trip, not because of sadness or pain, but because of just overwhelming joy. Of like, holy cow, I'm used to a sea of white faces. No offense, white people, but too much of you here. Like, I want to see more brothers and sisters. Come on. But yeah, that moment being in Colorado was definitely the catalyst. If the pregnancy was the spark, to Threat's question in there, the Colorado trip was the catalyst to just everything just moving super quick into my heart. Unless you have anything else, and I still want to finish up with powwows. We do have another question, but it seems like it's gonna divert away from powwow. So let's finish that and then we'll get to this.
Okay. I will say about you and Queen Latifah talking about just like missing that experience. I remember when I was in college, there was this period of time where I was dealing with such like a deep episode of depression. In that like month or two, I listened to nothing other than drum circle music. I just listened to cries and drums, and I had my headphones in all the time. And if I wasn't in class, I was listening to that music, and I was making my friends listen to that music, and just trying to explain like how much it meant to me. And whenever I hear it, it takes me back to being so little. I remember one of my first powwows that I can remember when I was 5. And I still can see myself, running with the other kids in the circle and doing the candy dance, and seeing all these animals that were there, that people brought their dogs, and it was this whole community. And when I listened to that music, it just it's like comfort food, like in my ears. And when I smell sage, I have my own bundle of sage that like I recently moved. And when I moved into my new house, I smudged the area in the room and my bed, and my dream catcher that I made myself by hand is hanging over my bed. And just so many pieces of myself that I picked up at things like powwows. Not just from my parents, but from other people that I came into contact with. It still has such a lasting effect on me, and I really do miss that. I know that about a year ago, for like Thanksgiving last year, I went to a powwow at the Native American Center in Columbus, and we had a meal together, and there was drum circle, and we had music. And I remember that was probably the only time I felt uneasy at something like that, because there was a lot of stuff in the news about hate crimes going on. And I just remember we were doing like a ceremonial prayer as a group, and I remember like almost being put to tears because I was so scared that someone was going to barge in, and they were going to hear our music and they were going to try to stop it. And something like that invading such a safe space for me was something I still remember that feeling. And that was really hard to deal with.
A few more thoughts here, talking about powwows and power related things. Shout out to all the different types of dances. You talked about the candy dance. I remember the first dance I ever learned was the step dance. That's still my go-to. That's the go-to for a lot of people, because that's just the basic keeping beat. But there are so many Native American dances, and it's like I don't even know all the names, but I just love seeing them all, and they all have different meanings. And the regalia, I have my mom send. Actually, I have my dad send me a picture. I'm gonna tweet it out, if not this week, if I remember, next week. But just seeing all the ceremonial outfits, and just because you talked about different tribes coming in, like whenever we would go, it's not like it was nothing but Comanches there. We're so spread out all over the place that there will be at these powwows so many different types of Native Americans. So you would see so many different headdresses and outfits, and even music, like you talked about the cries and the drums. There will be different groups that will go in, and they'll change out, and it'll be completely different. If you have that trained ear, it'll be completely different. So I really miss all that. I want to talk about the food real quick, and then I want to get to Magic's question here in the chat. What is your favorite? And you can't talk about the native tacos. Maybe you can talk about the fry bread, but you can't talk about the native tacos. What was your favorite thing to eat at the powwows?
I immediately knew my favorite thing to eat was wojapi, and I still make it. I have it whenever I make it. I'll have it for dessert, and then the next day I'll have it for breakfast.
I haven't had wojapi
and
in
I'll use it
forever.
in so many ways. I haven't made it in so long, but the last time, it's just like just making it. There's so many different things that this applies to.
For people who don't know what wojapi is, tell people.
Wojapi is it's essentially just berries boiled down with sugar and water.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this soupy, fruity thing that you put over fry bread, or you put over whatever you want,
or eat it as a soup.
I will put it on everything. Yeah, I'll put it on ice cream or crepes or fry bread or whatever. And it's so good. That was my favorite thing to have at powwows. But something that is so important, at least to me, but definitely important in Indigenous cultures, is when you're creating something, or you're doing something, your thoughts while you're doing it are so important.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like when we braid our hair, you're supposed to be thinking good thoughts and prayers while you braid your hair. And that's what blesses them and makes them so important. And so I know whenever I get the chance to make something like wojapi, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is like, what am I thinking about while I'm making this?
Yeah.
Like, I want to be thankful, and I want to think about all of the memories that I have behind this and the culture that goes into it. So yeah, that is definitely my favorite thing.
Do you remember buffalo bites?
No.
So buffalo bites were basically just bison meatballs, but they were all different. Of course, I used ketchup a lot, but I just remember that there were all these different types of sauces and things that you can. Wajabi was there too. Like you put that stuff on everything.
Yeah.
But there was this one particular, and I wish I could remember what it was called, but there was this one particular sauce that I can taste it when I think about it, and I can't place what it's called, but it was some kind of like, it felt like it was a cream based sauce. But anyways, you dip these bison balls into these, and it was just like another level. You ate them like they were chicken nuggets, even though it was just basically a meatball made out of just pure bison. Like you might have had some other things mixed in there. I wouldn't know. I've never made them, but I just remember eating them, and it was just like, it was another level. Okay. Yeah. And there is a new Indigenous food truck here in Columbus, Ohio. Have you tried it yet?
Yes.
I haven't tried it.
I actually, I went when they were doing like a kind of like a focus group type thing before they opened up. Okay. And I got to give them feedback on their food before they set their menu.
I want to try it so bad because I miss it.
They had the native tacos. They had these little they were like Hot Pockets, but it was like a native taco in a Hot Pocket.
Yep.
We had that. There was like Mohawk soup, chicken and wild rice soup, tons of fry bread. It was so good. They have done such a great job taking our food and our culture and making it into something that fits into like what society loves today.
Yeah.
And I know some people, when they see stuff like that, they get upset because it's like, why would you change what things are traditionally supposed to be? That's just, washing away and diluting our culture. But it's getting it out there, and it's a way that's accessible to other people, that other people can understand and that they can grow to love. And it's like a gateway to the culture. So yeah. I love that food truck and everything they are trying to do.
Ritz has a question here. Did you guys have scone dogs? Ritz, would you mind, while I'm saying this, would you mind describing what that is? Because there's a chance we might have eaten it. We just might not know the name.
Yeah.
I want to give just a brief history, because we've talked about fry bread a lot. And fry bread, when you look at a lot of Native American restaurants, it's a popular staple. It's used in many different fashions. But the way that fry bread came about was actually an oppressive thing. So when colonization was happening, when the white man was coming in and was they were kicking us out, and they were dumping us all on reservations, and they stripped our land of the resources, and they took everything from us, and they gave us kind of like MREs and rations. Like they only gave us so much food we could use. That's where fry bread came from. The native people at the time took the ingredients that they had and just made what they could. And fry bread was one of those things where it was like, it is super starchy. It was just like one of those things where you ate it to survive. For some reason, I think of like the biblical sense of when they were in the desert, traveling, trying to get to the promised land, and all they had was
Manna.
Manna. All they had was manna. That is like fry bread for Native Americans at the time. But now it's like, this is our culture. We are taking that. That is ours. Despite how it came to be, screw you, it's ours. Okay, so basically it's a hot dog in fry bread. Ritz remembers eating them a lot as a kid. I feel like I remember that. Like getting kids meals, which is weird. I don't know why we had kids meals at a powwow, but I vaguely remember that. Not a ton, but I do.
Yeah.
But okay, I want to get to this question because I don't want to get past it too far. But Magic asked a question in the chat. What are your thoughts on the genres of games that are based entirely on colonization? The Civilization games being one of the most popular examples. Is it possible to have an indigenous-friendly game in this genre at all? That is a loaded freaking question. As somebody who loves the Civilization games, I love Age of Empires. I realize those are a tad different, but they're similar. It's tough. You either need to have a game that's about colonization, or like you can't pass off that game about colonization. Like you can't pass off Civilization as, hey, that's a game that's about indigenous people. It's indigenous friendly. I think it is very possible to have a game that is about indigenous people, that is friendly. Will people want to play it? I don't know. It depends on who's making it. It depends on what the story is. It depends on where you are in the timeline. Like, do you play the story? Like, does the story go to a point where, crap, now you've hit the white man and you know what's going to happen? Or is it purely just about those peoples? I feel like it can be done because I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic. But it's one of those things where the only way that it's going to be done is if you have the right people. Like if we were consulting for it, like you have to have native voices in there. You cannot have a group full of white people, no matter what country you're from, making the decisions for these minority voices. One game that immediately comes to mind is Far Cry Primal. I'm sure that Ubisoft did their best, and you know what, to the whole caveman thing, sure, I guess I can see it, but there were some aspects of Far Cry Primal that I felt were a little bordering on offensive when it comes to indigenous people. So, I remember way back in the day, I was in youth group growing up. We were wondering hey, can they make a video game about the Bible and make it fun? And then we got the Bible game, which is just this trivia thing. But I was like, no. You make it about the rapture or something where it's really freaking intense and people are disappearing and dying. Yeah. If you did something like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it can.
I think.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I think that, like you said, if you have the right way of doing it, you have minority voices that are ahead on that. I think as long as we just cut out this repeating narrative of romanticizing things that have happened.
Yeah.
I think people try to find easy ways to overlook colonization by romanticizing the smallest parts of it, just to distract people from what really happened.
Yeah.
I think if I mean, it's exactly what you said. If you do it the right way and you have the right people, then I mean, I think it could be done.
Quinlan T says, I was looking up a Wajapi recipe, and the first one I came across had a Pocahontas Barbie in the picture.
Yep, perfect.
Yep, that's right on cue for that. Awesome. Well, if you have more questions, if you have more things that you want to bring up, please share those. I've got a few more things left of stuff that I wanted to talk about tonight, and I know we're running a lot longer than initially anticipated, but it's all been amazing conversation, and I hope you all have been enjoying it too. And if you want another one of these, I really want to do one with more native voices around the gaming sphere specifically. But yeah, okay, so let's go back to the education question that we had from Threat earlier and finish in the collegiate aspect.
Yes.
What has been Indigenous education been like for you in college?
I will say that at the university I went to, I was a part of the diverse students group, and the staff member in charge of that group was amazing to me. He was so open to different ideas. We never got to really move forward with it, but he was more than ecstatic to talk about organizing a powwow for the campus in the right way and making Native American Heritage Month just as big of a deal as Hispanic Heritage Month and Black Heritage Month. So that aspect was great. He taught a class about diversity, and he had me come in and teach a couple lessons just about my experience with oppression and the education system and my culture and things that I grew up with that other people maybe didn't know about.
Yeah.
So in that sense, from the right people, it seemed very inclusive, and I loved that side of it. The other side of that coin, though, is I took a class on like Western history or something like that. And my professor was a little rude, just in general. He was kind of weird, so I was a little hesitant to talk to him at first, but he got to a point in class where we were talking about the native civilizations, like right before colonization and everything. And he would repeatedly use the term savage, which is a word that I'm very uncomfortable with.
Huh.
But he would talk about, I know he would find a way to word things to get away with not being blatantly racist.
Yeah.
But he would talk about how, the colonizers, thought that they were all savages in the savage way that they did things. And he completely overlooked the fact that we had such well-established and advanced communities of people here before colonization came in.
Yeah.
That we weren't just this group of Neanderthals.
Like, what was he thinking we were like?
I don't know. And he taught us about this like painting that was famous around the time of colonization of like native communities being very like cut and dry, like looking like a modern town. That some European did to make it look like the Americas was a place that they wanted to invade because it was so advanced and everything. And he said that they were masking how the savages were. And I was, as far as I knew, the only Indigenous person in his class. And I wrote him an email that I was very scared to send because, again, it's like this professor who's supposed to be teaching us, what could he do wrong?
And he has the whole university behind him, and you're that small person.
Yeah. I told him straight up, I said, you have been a great professor so far. I don't have a problem with the rest of your class, but in these past lessons, I have been uncomfortable sitting in that classroom and listening to you talk about my people in this way. I am not trying to tell you that you're a bad person or that you're a bad professor. I just simply want to have a conversation with you and make some suggestions on how you can talk about this minority group of people without being offensive
Yeah.
and still get your point across. And he responded and he basically said, I'm teaching the class. I did nothing wrong. I know what I'm talking about, and you are just a student. But thanks for reaching out. And I got the diversity staff involved and I CC'd them in, and I said, I really didn't appreciate your response. And I never heard anything else back from him. And he, from that point on, was cold to me in class. He never, when I would raise my hand, he would never call on me. He wouldn't really talk to me or make eye contact when I had questions about stuff in the class. He was just very cold to me after that.
And he was the racist
and that
one.
was probably, huh?
And he was the racist one. Sorry, I didn't mean to interject. I'm just getting angry over here.
Yeah. So, there was no reason why I should have had to, but I read my email that I sent him over and over and over again and tried to figure out what I did wrong for him to respond that way. Like, was I too harsh? Was I condescending? I read my email to other, peers and classmates, like, does this sound like aggressive or anything? And I never did anything wrong. I was just speaking how I felt, which I have the right to do in my position, and I was completely shut down.
Yeah.
So that was probably my most impactful experience at the collegiate level with my culture.
For me, which I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it was like that for you. For me, it was almost just completely non-existent. At the good old The Ohio State University, as they like to coin it, there wasn't a whole lot of anything. A lot of people talk about, oh man, being Native American must be great because you get free education, you get free college. I think that's a myth because I feel like we are the and I could be speaking out of turn, and I apologize if I am, but I feel like we're the only ethnicity, the only group of people that we have to prove who we are.
We are.
And to get any sort of benefit that was promised to us. So, in some regard, I get it, because you've got everybody and their brother says, I'm Native American. Okay, we need to make sure that you actually are. Fine. I wouldn't want people lying either. But what does that say about us and about them that, oh, we feel like we owe you these benefits, this reparation money, so to speak. And the only way you're going to get that is if you can prove to us that you are what you are. Which is, so we went through that process. You never got the money. I never got the money. Right? So we never got that government money because this is what the process was like for us. And it could have been different for other people. So you have to show the birth certificate of not just yourself, but you have to show the birth certificate of your parents. You have to have the what is the letter from our First Nations representatives, like our
essentially you have to be legally enrolled in your tribe, in your nation,
yes,
to be able to get to even start to get any sort of benefits. And I spent at least a year trying to become enrolled in the Comanche Nation. And I had folders and folders of paperwork, and I did so much research, and I emailed people, and I tried to reach out, and it is so difficult because the U.S. government has made it so hard to even get that information. And then the people, the nations of people on reservations have, and I know there's the stereotype of like the casinos and having all of that money and everything, but people that live on these reservations, from any establishments, a lot of them might happen to be casinos, any money they get from that goes to the nation, and then it's distributed through their people. And so a lot of um, elders in those nations are not trying to let more people in, because then that's
Less for
less
everyone
money
else.
for their people that are already there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
So
of what
it's
the US
hard
government has
from the
done.
US government. It's hard from, yes. Yeah.
So to the process is just a bunch of hoops that basically amount to nothing, and it's like a slap in the face. It's not the phrase that I wanted because it's worse than that, but it is what it is. It makes me think about. I'm very happy for our nephews. So our brothers are half Native American, half black. But our oldest brother, his wife is from the Skyy tribe. So like over there in San Diego, the Skyy people, they are there. You know,
Yeah.
it's not quite our reservation land, which Quahada Comanche, Green River tribe. Our reservation land is in New Mexico. I don't want to say it's desolate, but from what I understand, it's pretty barren, and that's why a community college built on the grounds without nobody's permission. But anyways, like the Saigon people in the Saigon area in San Diego is thriving. Like they've got the
Yeah.
resort, they do have the casinos, they have police. Like it is a very active group. So I feel very happy for our nephews because it should be a lot easier for them. But it shouldn't have to be
Yeah.
such a safeguarded community for it to be that easy. Is basically what I'm trying to get to. It shouldn't
Yeah.
have to be to where not only do we have to prove to the university that we are what our blood already says that we are, but now we have to prove to the government that we belong to the people that we already belong to. Like it's, yeah, it is what it is there. Okay, so I know we're coming, even though there wasn't really a set time. I'm gonna give us like 10 more minutes because I know it's been going on for a while. Anything else that you wanted to add? I agree with Threat. I think a part two would be amazing. I think a part two, three, four, five,
Yeah.
in various different formats. Because I would love to get Queen Latifah in here. I would love to get Ritz in here. I want to get more native voices. Because again, this, as you saw by the title, this is just growing up Indigenous. That's what
Yeah.
this stream is about. That's what this conversation has been about. It's just what it has been like for us growing up Indigenous. So I want to talk about what does racism look like? What is proper representation? Again, more specifically in the gaming sphere, what does that look like? And then any other conversations that people think that we should have, I want to be able to have them, particularly this month. But honestly, like we had said before, I'll take anything because
Yeah.
it needs to happen. But in the last few minutes here, we don't really need to go to some of this other stuff that I have unless you want to. Things that I have written down, holidays. That was always very particular, especially with Thanksgiving that's coming up. We grew up with a lot of restrictions there. And then just getting into restrictions, period. Like things that we weren't allowed to watch or listen to because it was against our culture.
Yeah.
So that's just some stuff here that I had written down. Also, like friends, fitting in, being native. Like there's so
Yeah.
much. Like there's just so much to
Yeah.
dive into. Even still, that I feel like we could go for another hour. But if you want to touch on some of that, you can. If you don't, if you just want to give some final thoughts, you can do that too. Because we just have a handful of minutes left. But I'll toss it off to you,
Yeah.
and then I'll say a few things, and I'll let you go.
Yeah. Um, I would like to mention, if you have any relation to this at all, like if you can relate at all, but something that was difficult for me, as you said, growing up Indigenous, it took me a while, even though I loved things like powwows and I loved the the learning about it in school with mom and dad and everything. I loved that stuff, but it was difficult for me to really find what it meant for me personally to be Indigenous, because there was so little representation, and there was one of other person that was Indigenous in my school growing up. And I remember she was not very forthcoming about our culture. She really hid it. And so I didn't really have a lot to connect with. And really, the only representation that I saw, the closest thing that I could relate to, was the faces of like the Black community that were represented, because at least they were faces of color that I could kind of relate to.
Mm-hmm.
And all growing up, everyone always assumes that I'm Black. Like Native American is never something that crosses their mind.
Never.
And never. And it's like they're surprised by it. Like, oh, that's still an option. I forgot. But just something that I have found that has been disconcerting for me growing up was kind of when people are assuming that I was Black, I received a lot of hate for that too.
Mm-hmm.
And I've carried so much just oppression and hate for a group of people that isn't even my own, on top of what I already have to deal with. I remember being called the N-word constantly
all the time
in school. I remember even as early as second grade was one of the most memorable times that I had my life threatened and our dad's life threatened because I was Black. And it's like, it's just so confusing being so young and not even getting to grasp the concept of what is my culture, but having to carry this burden of something that isn't even mine. And that's something that's been really hard, is not just the erasure of Indigenous cultures around me, but even in myself, that people don't even know who I am. And I've had so many people to my face say that when I say I'm Indigenous, they don't believe me. I have had, when I moved in freshman year of college, my roommate's dad, first of all, said, "Oh yeah, I'm Cherokee somewhere." And I was like, okay. And they were like, "But you don't look Indigenous. I don't believe you." And that entire year that we were roommates, she would constantly tell me that her dad would always bring up that he didn't believe me. I'm like, why does it matter in the first place? Why do you have to keep bringing this up? Like, I don't even talk to you.
Yeah.
But why? Like, why is it so hard to believe?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you've been affected in that way.
What 100%. That was one thing that I always really connected to with our dad. When he talked about growing up of, well, aside from the time when he grew up on the reservation, but like people never knew what I was. Growing up as a kid, being an adult, whenever I would travel to places and speak, whenever I would stream, even now, people just assuming that I'm Black or I'm Hispanic or that I'm Middle Eastern, never Native American. And while, sure, I go ahead and identify me as one of those amazing groups of people, but why does it matter? And also, why can't Native be in that list? Like, there are, if you learn, there are facial features that are prominent in Native Americans, and we've got them. Why can't you notice that? Why is that something that people just don't think of? So never really fitting in, especially growing up in Central Ohio. I'm not white enough. And again, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I'm not white enough. I'm not Black enough. I'm not Hispanic enough. I don't fit into any of these other groups. And then you add into we're mixed. And for me, there weren't any other Native people that I knew of.
Yeah.
Everybody fit into a certain area, and I fit into me, and that was it. And when you add into the fact that we're mixed, that just, and it's a whole nother like can of worms. But it just, our mom's white, so when people would see us with her, they would just assume that we're adopted. Like, so there was just never a break. There was never a break growing up and all of that. And then like you talk about like seeing representation. My favorite superhero is Spider-Man, and Peter Parker is a white guy. you know, I was really happy when Miles Morales came around because it was a person of color, but I was just so beaten over the head with like, most superheroes are white that I'm like, no, Peter Parker is my Spider-Man. Like that was me for a long time. And I can't really think. Like I can try really hard, but all I can think of are there are white superheroes and then there are black superheroes. And then there are some other like outliers, like Miles Morales is mixed. But aside from that, like when it comes to Native Americans, like we're just not there. I can think of Street Fighter with T-Hawk, which is very on the nose. Like, okay, it's to the point where it's offensive. Like he's so Native American.
Yeah.
You've got Nighthawk from Mortal Kombat. Like people go so hard into it to make them native, where like, oh, okay, the dude throws tomahawks, he turns into a wolf, he throws a hawk. Like, okay, like this is too far at this point. Just give me a healthy person to look up to that's native.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I've got nothing.
Yeah.
Queen Latifah says Katara was my superhero. Sorry.
I will say something that I recently saw that was upsetting, because I try on my personal Twitter to follow like good Indigenous influences that I see.
Mm-hmm.
Just so, even though it's just my timeline, I feel a little bit more represented. But I saw a screenshot of someone, like some news channel, talking about like the demographic of voters in the election. And there was like all of these different groups of people listed. And then, of course, like Indigenous, Native American, whatever wasn't on there, it was just something else. It literally said something else. And I was like, you couldn't just, like, I don't get it. But on the flip side of that, what I have seen amazingly in the movement of Black Lives Matter and everything else that's going on right now is POC is used for people of color.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen a lot of people using instead BIPOC for Black Indigenous people of color to be more inclusive, because it needs to be. And so I've seen so many people starting to use that term, and it just makes me feel really happy.
I prefer
every time I see it.
A threat says, Avatar was the only show that showed Indigenous cultures in a non-offensive way. The Water Tribe, the Inuits, and that is a great positive step forward. We need more. Like I want to see real Native brothers out there. I want more. Skyy, thank you so much. New Sky Nakoa, thank you so much. Any last words you want to say before I send you off on your way?
Just again, we've already said it, but don't let watching this conversation and this stream or whatever other streams we do in the future, don't let that be the extent of your involvement in this issue. I think that especially now in what's going on in our society, and not just our country, but all over the world, I think people need to start leaving their comfort zones and being more intentional with how they see the world and how they see other people. And I think we need to start being more activists about stuff. I think that you shouldn't just hope that our voices are being heard. I think you should help magnify them. So please don't let watching this stream end your activism. Please keep moving towards that, because we cannot do it alone.
Yeah. I 100% echo that. And thank you again for being on. If you're watching, don't go anywhere. I'm going to wrap things up. I got a few other things to say, but I told Skyy previously, 15, 20, 30 minutes ended up turning into almost an hour, or maybe more than an hour. What time is it? It's well over an hour. So thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And obviously I'll talk to you soon, sister.
Yep. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you again, Skyy, for being on, and hopefully you're still in the chat finishing this out. Gotta get them views, baby. But no, really, thank you everybody so much. I really do. I want to do more parts. I was really nervous going into it, and I still feel a little bit of nerves now. But once we got going and once we got to talking about it and really sharing it, most of the nerves went away because I felt the importance. And so, if possible, we need to keep the voices going. Like Jay Grady said, it's about the education. Like Rit said, it's about the education. People need to unlearn a lot of things, and we need to get these voices out there. So, please let me know. Reach out to me on Twitter. Share the VOD on this, because I know that there's probably people who haven't seen that need to see it. But let me know. Do I need to put this up on YouTube? Should I make it also an audio version for people to listen to? Where do you think this needs to go? And then let me know, what do you want for the other parts? Because I know what I have in mind, but I also want to make sure that, like, if people have questions, if people want to learn more, if there are other, specifically, like if there are other Native Indigenous voices that are out there, especially in the gaming space in particular, because I want to have that conversation, please ping those people, flag those people, share it around. And I know that I've said it before, and I've got a couple of people, threat level, that I know that have reached out to me, and I want to connect with them on this. But please, it's not about clout. It's not about exposure with me within these big games media platforms. It truly is 100%. Like I said at the beginning, I want to be that face. I remember being that kid and watching TV and watching movies and reading comic books and playing games, watching cartoons, anime, whatever. And there was nobody who was like me. And so I had to cling on to, even though they were great people, I had to cling on to all of these other people because that's all I had. But if anybody is watching or listening to this and you can think of that moment where you really connected with a creator, you really connected with a movie, a show, a book, or I don't know, whatever it is, because you could see yourself in them, because you could feel like their experiences were close to yours, there's something to that. And representation is so incredibly important for many reasons, for so many different cultures. And Native Americans, First Nations, Indigenous people need to be in that list. So please, if there are specific people who are hosting podcasts, who are hosting shows, who are doing whatever it is, tag them, tag me, put it out there, because people need to know we're still here. We're not a long gone society. We're not, our tribes aren't dead. Our tribes are alive. Our fire is alive. Our people are here. We're celebrating. We spent this whole night talking about, what it was like growing up. What are those memories that we have? Smelling that sage, being out in the hot sun and these powwows, talking about the delicious food, the hate that we felt, like bonding together on that. There's just so much. There's so much that people don't know. So please, let's broadcast this out. But anyways, I appreciate everybody. I appreciate everybody for watching. I appreciate everybody for taking the time to share this moment with me, to share this moment with Skyy. And I am eternally grateful. I'm forever grateful. And hopefully I will see you soon, whether it be in another form like this or a regular stream or whatever it is. But yes, thank you so much, and be well.